Billionaire freezes in court when he sees his abandoned ex-wife with a 23-year-old judge who looks just like him. They say time buries the past, but in that courtroom, my past rose to bury me. One glance was enough. Her eyes, sharp and familiar, held the weight of everything I had tried to forget. And behind her, my ex-wife, the woman I abandoned, watched in silence, her gaze cutting deeper than any verdict. My fortune, my pride, all of it crumbled in that moment. But stay with me, family, because what began in shame became a story of redemption, forgiveness, and love finding its way home again. Let me ask you, if the one you once hurt stood before you, would you have the courage to face them, or would you turn away? Share your heart in the comments. Your voice matters in this family. Lord, bless every soul watching. May their wounds find healing, their regrets find grace, and their homes be filled with second chances. Amen. Now tell us, where are you watching from? The US, New York, Texas, California? The UK, Canada, Germany, or across Africa and Asia? We'd love to see how far this family reaches. Ethan Ward stood at the highest floor of his corporate tower, staring out at the glass and steel skyline he had built piece by piece. To the outside world, he was the embodiment of success, his name etched into skyscrapers, whispered in boardrooms, envied in gossip columns. Billionaire. Innovator. Untouchable. But in the silence of his office, where the hum of the city could not reach, Ethan heard something else, the echo of his own emptiness. He ran a hand over his watch, platinum, custom, one of a kind. He owned everything, yet when the lights dimmed and his meetings ended, there was no voice waiting for him. No one to tell him he wasn't just a name on headlines. The tabloids had once said Ethan Ward didn't believe in love, only power. That wasn't entirely true. He had believed in it once, fiercely, until the very moment he walked away. Pride had made the decision. Pride had told him she'd never matter more than his empire. He had been wrong. But pride was a parasite. It doesn't admit mistakes, it feeds on them. Sir. A voice interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, poised and sharp, stepped in. Your driver is waiting. You'll be late for court. Ethan's brow furrowed. Court. A case involving one of his subsidiaries, petty compared to the deals he usually handled, but the press demanded his presence. He despised wasting time in public hearings. Judges, lawyers, reporters, they were vultures circling wealth. He grabbed his coat and brushed past her, his expression unreadable. Let's get it over with. But the knot in his chest suggested otherwise. Across the city, Claire Monroe smoothed the hem of her navy blue dress and exhaled slowly. She didn't wear designer gowns or glittering jewels. Her outfit was simple, elegant, and it carried her dignity like armor. The morning sunlight spilled across her modest apartment, walls adorned not with expensive art but with photographs. A smiling little girl on a swing. School recitals. College graduation. And now, a photograph of a young woman in her judicial robes, determination gleaming in her eyes. Her daughter. Claire traced her finger over the frame, pride swelling inside her chest. 23 years ago, she had been left with nothing but a broken heart and a child inside her womb. She had survived. She had built a life not of wealth, but of meaning. Her daughter had never asked about her father, not directly. She had pieced together her story in fragments. In hushed conversations Claire avoided too long. The resemblance had always been there, unignorable. The fire in her, the way she carried herself, it was his blood too. Now, fate had written a cruel symmetry. Today, they would all be under the same roof. Claire adjusted her blazer, her lips pressing into a thin line. She had prepared for this day, told herself she would be calm, composed, untouchable. But deep inside, Her chest throbbed with a mixture of dread and something far more dangerous, longing. She had once loved Ethan Ward so completely it had nearly destroyed her. She had vowed never to let him undo her again. "Mom." A voice called from the hallway. The young judge stepped into the room, her robe draped over one arm. Claire turned, her heart swelling at the sight. Amelia Monroe. Her daughter. Her anchor. Her justice. "You're ready," Claire said softly. Amelia smiled faintly, though nerves flickered in her eyes. "First high-profile case. They'll all be watching." "They'll be watching you succeed," Claire replied, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "Just as you always have." Neither spoke of the name waiting for them inside that courtroom. The city hummed as two cars traveled toward the courthouse from opposite ends. Ethan's sleek black limousine slid through traffic like a shadow. Claire and Amelia rode in a modest sedan, its engine steady and unassuming. Inside his car, Ethan's phone buzzed endlessly. Executives, journalists, shareholders. He ignored them all, staring instead at the reflection in the tinted window. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw a pair of eyes staring back at him, her eyes. The woman he had left. He shook his head, dismissing the ghost. In the sedan, Amelia drove while Claire sat silent beside her. The young judge glanced at her mother, sensing the tension she carried like a second skin. "You're quiet," Amelia said. "I'm just thinking," Claire replied carefully. "About today? Or about him?" Claire stiffened, her gaze snapping to her daughter. But Amelia's eyes remained on the road, calm and knowing. She didn't need the answer spoken aloud. Claire turned toward the window, whispering more to herself than to Amelia. Some ghosts never really leave. The courthouse loomed ahead, columns tall and unyielding, its stone walls holding centuries of secrets. For Ethan, it was just another stage, another arena where power was measured and displayed. For Claire, it was a battlefield of memory. For Amelia, it was her proving ground. Ethan stepped from his limousine, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. He wore his arrogance like armor, jaw tight, eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. Across the steps, Claire and Amelia approached. Claire held her head high, her hand brushing against her daughter's arm for reassurance. Amelia moved with quiet authority, robe folded neatly, chin lifted. For one brief, suspended moment, their paths intersected on the courthouse steps. Ethan's gaze flicked toward Claire, and stopped. Time froze. Her hair was different, her eyes a little older, but it was her. Claire. The woman he had walked away from. She looked back at him, calm, unflinching, as though he were no more than a stranger. But it was Amelia who caught his breath, though he didn't yet understand why. The curve of her jaw, the set of her brow, the unmistakable echo of his own youth. She brushed past him, her eyes flicking up only for a second. And Ethan felt his chest tighten with something he hadn't known in decades. Fear. What do you think, if you were in Claire's shoes, would you ever forgive a man who abandoned you, no matter how powerful he became? Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The courtroom was colder than expected. The air hummed with whispers, the shuffle of papers, the heavy tread of lawyers preparing for spectacle. Ethan Ward strode to his seat with a kind of presence that commanded attention. Broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed, the sharp scent of his cologne clinging to the air like a warning. Every gaze followed him, yet none pierced as sharply as the one seated across the gallery. Claire Monroe. She didn't flinch. Didn't fidget. She sat with the stillness of someone who had long ago faced her greatest storm and survived. A simple navy blouse, pressed slacks, elegance without excess. She didn't need diamonds to shine. The quiet steadiness in her eyes was enough to burn him. But it was the young woman entering the bench that snapped the last thread of his composure. The robe draped across her shoulders seemed too heavy for 23 years, yet she wore it with authority. Amelia Monroe's eyes scanned the room briefly, calmly, before fixing on the case file before her. And for Ethan, it was like staring into a mirror of the past. The angle of her cheekbones, the subtle curl of her dark hair, even the deliberate precision of her movements, she was him, reshaped in youth and grace. A low, electric hum coursed through his veins. He could not look away. The bailiff called for silence. Amelia's voice rang clear. "Court is now in session." It was steady, professional. But to Ethan, every syllable reverberated in his chest, forcing his mind toward the possibility he dared not speak. He leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, fists pressed against his thighs. Claire's calm expression across the room only deepened the storm raging inside him. She knew. She must have known. Is she mine? The thought drilled through him. Is she my blood? His lawyer nudged him, whispering about the company's defense. Ethan barely heard him. Words blurred, arguments became static. The only clarity was the girl on the bench and the woman watching him from the gallery. Claire felt his gaze like fire on her skin. She kept her chin high, eyes trained on Amelia, refusing to acknowledge Ethan Ward with anything more than silence. Inside, her heart pounded. The years had not softened the effect he had on her. Even now, surrounded by walls of justice and order, the weight of his presence threatened to unravel her composure. But then she looked at Amelia, her daughter, her strength, and steadied herself. She would not falter. Not for him. She remembered the day she had walked away, the day Ethan had chosen ambition over family. She had been left with nothing but a child inside her and the hollow echo of promises he had never kept. She had raised Amelia alone, through nights of hunger and mornings of relentless work. Every step, every sacrifice, had led to this moment, her daughter standing tall, wielding authority Ethan could never control. And Claire almost smiled. Justice had a way of circling back. Amelia sensed the tension like a current, though her training demanded she rise above it. She had studied too long, fought too hard, to let personal distractions mar her first high-profile case. Still, when her gaze flickered across the courtroom, it caught on him, Ethan Ward. The name had been whispered in her household like a curse, though never directly explained. The resemblance she noticed was undeniable, yet Claire had always turned conversations away when Amelia asked. And now here he was, sitting at the defense table, his eyes locked on her as though searching for something he had lost. Amelia steadied her breath, fingers tightening on her gavel. She could not afford to wonder. Today, she was not a daughter with questions. She was Judge Monroe. "Proceed," she ordered. He watched her, his heart hammering with each word she spoke. She carried herself with discipline, but Ethan saw flashes beyond it, the stubborn tilt of her chin, the fire in her eyes. His fire. His blood. He wanted to stand, to demand the truth from Claire, to shatter the silence that chained him. But pride kept him seated, spine straight, expression cold. Still, his thoughts betrayed him. If she is mine, then I abandoned not one, but two. The weight of it pressed against his chest, suffocating. He caught Claire's gaze again. Her lips curved just slightly, not in kindness, but in something harder, vindication. And Ethan knew. She had hidden the truth. She had raised this daughter without him. And she had done it well. Lawyers spoke, evidence shuffled, arguments flew. Ethan barely followed. For the first time in his life, the outcome of a trial didn't matter. His company's defense, his reputation, even his billions, all of it faded beneath the gravity of the revelation sitting in front of him. Claire sat poised, every so often exchanging the faintest of glances with Amelia. They didn't need words. Their bond was visible, woven into the very rhythm of their breaths. Ethan clenched his jaw. That bond should have been his too. When the recess was called, he stood abruptly. The courtroom buzzed with chatter as he crossed toward the gallery. Claire rose at the same time, intercepting his path before he could reach Amelia. "Don't," she whispered sharply, her eyes like steel. He stopped, stunned by the quiet ferocity in her voice. "Claire, you lost the right to say my name years ago." Her words sliced deeper than he expected. He searched her face for any softness, any trace of the woman who once loved him. There was none. Only the unflinching gaze of someone who had survived without him. Amelia approached, professional as ever. "Mr. Ward, please refrain from disrupting proceedings. You'll have your chance to speak when addressed." Her tone was clipped, firm. But when her eyes met his, just for a second, something flickered, curiosity. Confusion. A recognition she couldn't name. Ethan's breath caught. As Amelia brushed past him, her robe swaying, Ethan caught the faintest scent of her perfume, clean, floral, achingly familiar. For a moment, he was transported to decades earlier, to a night when Claire had worn the same fragrance, her laughter spilling across his chest. He turned back, watching as Amelia walked away, and in her stride, in her poise, he saw it again. Himself. The room tilted, his vision blurring. He gripped the edge of a bench to steady himself. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward felt powerless. Outside the courtroom doors, Claire stopped him. Her voice was low, controlled, each syllable carved with intent. "You keep your distance. This is her moment, not yours. You will not ruin it." Ethan met her eyes, desperation breaking through the cracks of his pride. "She's mine, isn't she?" Claire's face didn't flinch, but her silence was louder than any admission. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Claire, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you made your choice," she said. "And so did I." Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked away, leaving him frozen in the corridor. The courthouse doors swung shut behind Claire and Amelia, their silhouettes framed in sunlight. Ethan stood in the shadows, torn between the life he had built and the one he had abandoned. For the first time in decades, the billionaire who had everything realized what he had truly lost. And he knew this was only the beginning. The courthouse cafeteria was quieter than the courtroom, but the silence here was sharper, cut with unspoken words. Ethan sat at a corner table, untouched coffee cooling in front of him. His lawyer had gone to make calls, but Ethan hadn't heard a word he'd said anyway. His world was still spinning from what he'd just witnessed. Amelia Monroe. Her name whispered through his mind like a riddle, a truth wrapped in silence. The moment her eyes had met his, something had cracked open inside him. Familiarity he couldn't deny, an echo of his own youth staring back from her face. And Claire. Claire had looked at him as if he had no right to breathe the same air. As if his very presence was poison. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, rubbing his temple with the heel of his hand. He had faced hostile boardrooms, vicious competitors, government investigations. Nothing had ever made him feel so helpless as sitting under the gaze of a girl who might be his daughter. Claire guided Amelia down the marble steps of the courthouse. Outside, the press swarmed like bees, shouting questions about the case, about Ethan Ward, about the young judge who had suddenly become the focus of every camera lens. Amelia answered none of them. She kept her chin high, her silence commanding more respect than words could. Claire shadowed her like a shield, her heart pounding with pride and dread in equal measure. They slipped into the car waiting for them. Claire closed the door and finally exhaled. "You did well," she said softly. Amelia gave a faint, tight smile. "I felt his eyes the entire time." Claire's breath caught. "Whose?" "You know who." Amelia turned her gaze out the window, voice quiet but steady. That man. Ethan Ward. Claire gripped her hands in her lap until her knuckles ached. Amelia never spoke his name. She never asked outright, but her tone carried a sharpness that told Claire the questions had been there all along. Claire chose her words carefully. He's dangerous, Amelia. Not in the way you think. But dangerous to your peace. Amelia turned, her eyes searching her mother's face. Why does he look at me like that? Claire's throat tightened. She had no answer that would not unravel everything. Hours later, Ethan's limousine pulled up to Claire's apartment building. He hadn't planned it. His driver had looked at him questioningly when he gave the address, but Ethan's voice had left no room for doubt. He stood on the cracked sidewalk, staring up at the modest brick building. The Billionaire, out of place among peeling paint and narrow staircases. He climbed to the second floor and knocked on the door. It opened halfway. Claire stood there, arms folded, eyes cold. You shouldn't be here, she said flatly. Ethan's chest tightened. I had to see you. You've seen enough. Claire, his voice cracked despite himself. Is she mine? The silence between them stretched. Claire's face betrayed nothing, but her grip on the doorframe tightened. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Please, don't lie to me. Her jaw trembled, just slightly. And then she whispered, what difference would it make now? The words struck him harder than any admission. From inside, Amelia's voice floated toward them. Mom? Who is it? Claire's eyes widened. She stepped back, blocking the doorway as Amelia appeared. Amelia froze at the sight of Ethan. Her gaze narrowed, searching his face with intensity. I know you, she said softly. Ethan's throat closed. You're Ethan Ward, Amelia continued. The man whose company I just presided over in court. Ethan nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her eyes lingered on his features, something unspoken flickering there. Finally, she tilted her head, her voice cool. You look familiar. Claire's hand shot out, resting protectively on Amelia's arm. Enough. Amelia, inside. Amelia hesitated, her eyes darting between her mother and Ethan. Then she stepped back, disappearing into the apartment. Claire's glare cut into Ethan like a blade. Stay away from her. She doesn't need you. Ethan's chest heaved, words fighting to escape. But I need her. Claire slammed the door. Back in the limousine, Ethan pressed his palms against his face. For decades, he had drowned guilt in power, told himself the past was buried. But now the past had a name, a face, a daughter, Amelia. And she didn't even know. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward felt tears sting his eyes. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. A billionaire with everything, and not even the right to claim his own child. Inside the apartment, Amelia paced the living room. Her eyes were stormy, her hands restless. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded. Claire stiffened. Tell you what? That I look like him. That he knows us. That there's something. Amelia's voice broke. You can't keep pretending this is nothing. Claire sank into the couch, covering her face with her hands. I wanted to protect you. From what? From the truth. Amelia's voice cracked with anger. Or from him. Claire looked up, tears welling in her eyes. From both. Amelia turned away, her body rigid with frustration. You've always said I was enough. That I didn't need to know where I came from. But I see it now, Mom. I see it in his face. Claire's chest ached with the weight of her daughter's pain. But she held her silence, terrified that speaking the truth would destroy everything she had built. That night, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, city lights sprawling endlessly below him. His reflection stared back from the glass, aged, weary, but still proud. For years, he had told himself that money was power, that regret could be silenced by success. But now, staring at his own reflection, he saw her face superimposed. Amelia's. He whispered her name to the empty room. And then, with a steadiness that surprised him, he vowed, "I will not lose her again." What do you think Amelia deserves? The truth about her father, or the peace of never knowing the man who abandoned her mother? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following morning dawned gray, the kind of sky that pressed low against the city as if trying to suffocate it. Ethan sat in the back of his limousine, restless, his driver weaving through traffic while his mind churned in chaos. Sleep had evaded him. His thoughts had been consumed by the same two faces, Claire, hardened by years without him, and Amelia, the young judge whose very existence tore apart everything he thought he knew. "She is mine," his instincts screamed. His blood, his fire, his mirror. And yet, she was also a stranger. He pressed a hand against the window, watching the blur of pedestrians. Somewhere among them lived the daughter who did not know his name beyond headlines and scandal. Today, he decided, that would change. Claire was already awake, though she had hardly slept either. She stood in the kitchen, staring into her coffee as though it might offer an escape. The apartment smelled faintly of toast, but she hadn't eaten. Amelia walked in, hair damp from a rushed shower, robe draped loosely around her. She carried her mug like a shield, sipping with deliberate calm. "Big day?" Claire asked gently. "Routine," Amelia said flatly, though the slight shake in her hand betrayed her. Claire studied her daughter, heart aching. Amelia was strong, stronger than she had ever been at that age. But strength couldn't shield her from questions. Not forever. "Amelia," Claire began softly. "About yesterday." Her daughter cut her off with a sharp glance. "Don't. Not unless you're ready to tell me the truth." Claire swallowed, her voice dying in her throat. Amelia turned away, grabbing her case files. "I'll see you at the courthouse." The door shut behind her, and Claire's shoulders sagged under the weight of the lies she had carried for 23 years. When Amelia stepped out of her building, she froze. Leaning against a sleek black car, hands tucked into his coat pockets, stood Ethan Ward. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she thought of turning back inside. But something in his eyes stopped her, not arrogance this time, not the cold superiority he wore in the courtroom, but desperation. "Judge Monroe," he greeted, voice low. Amelia's brows knitted. "Mr. Ward, this is inappropriate." "Please," he said, stepping forward. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." She hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away. But curiosity gnawed at her, louder than caution. She nodded stiffly. 5 minutes. They moved to a quiet corner near the building. Ethan's hands shook as he tried to steady his voice. "You don't know me," he said carefully. "Not truly. But when I look at you, I see something I've never felt before." Amelia frowned. "What are you implying?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say it. To claim her. But fear of rejection, of shattering the fragile moment, held him back. Instead, he whispered, "You remind me of someone I once loved." Her eyes searched his face, suspicion and curiosity warring within them. "My mother." Ethan froze. Amelia's lips parted in realization. "It's her, isn't it? You and her. There's something you're not telling me." Ethan's silence was answer enough. The sound of hurried footsteps broke the moment. "Amelia." Claire's voice cut through the air, sharp and urgent. She approached, her eyes blazing at Ethan. "Get away from her." Amelia blinked, startled by her mother's fury. "Mom." Claire grabbed her daughter's arm, pulling her back. "Don't listen to him. Not a word." Ethan's chest heaved. "She deserves the truth, Claire." Claire's glare could have shattered glass. "The truth? Or your version of it? You left me. You left us. Don't you dare waltz back in here now as though you have something to offer." Amelia's gaze darted between them, confusion etched deep into her features. "What is going on?" Claire tightened her grip, dragging her daughter toward the car. Amelia resisted, eyes still locked on Ethan. "Mom, answer me." But Claire only whispered, voice breaking, "Not here. Not like this." The door slammed shut, and the car sped away, leaving Ethan standing in the cold morning air, gutted. The ride was suffocating. Amelia sat rigid in the back seat, her mother beside her, silence pressing harder than any words. Finally, Amelia snapped. "Enough. I'm not a child, Mom. You can't keep me in the dark." Claire's hands trembled in her lap. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand." Amelia's voice cracked, tears threatening. "Why does he look at me like that? Why do I look like him? Why does this feel like I'm missing half my life?" Claire turned away, staring out the window as the city rushed by. Amelia's chest heaved. "He's my father, isn't he?" Claire's silence was deafening. And in that silence, Amelia had her answer. Ethan spent the day in his office, but not a single document held his attention. His empire, his billions, his boardroom battles, all meaningless compared to the storm that had ignited in Claire's eyes, the confusion in Amelia's. He poured himself a drink, staring at the amber liquid swirling in his glass. For decades, he had built walls of steel around his heart. Now, with a single look, Amelia had torn them down. And Claire, she still hated him. He lifted the glass, but before he could drink, he hurled it against the wall. Shards rained down, scattering across the floor. "I will fix this," he growled to the empty room. "I have to." That night, Amelia stormed into the kitchen, slamming her bag onto the counter. Claire sat at the table, staring at a stack of unopened letters she had never mailed. Letters she had written to Ethan in the early years, each one a plea for help, for recognition, for closure. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amelia demanded. Claire's eyes welled with tears. "Because I wanted to protect you from him." "Protect me?" Amelia's laugh was bitter. "From what? From knowing who I am? From knowing that the man I've seen on magazine covers my whole life is the reason I exist?" Claire's hands shook as she reached for her daughter. "I didn't want you to feel abandoned." Amelia pulled back. "But I do. Because you chose silence. And he chose pride. And I never got a choice." Her voice cracked, her anger spilling into tears. "All I wanted was the truth." Claire's sob escaped before she could stop it. She rose, clutching Amelia's shoulders. "You are my truth. You always have been. I didn't need him. And neither did you." Amelia's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Maybe not. But I deserved to know." She pulled away, retreating to her room, leaving Claire trembling in the doorway, the weight of her choices crushing her. Meanwhile, Ethan stood at the vast windows of his penthouse. The city sprawled beneath him. Lights glittered like stars, but none could pierce the darkness inside him. He thought of Amelia's eyes, so full of fire and confusion. He thought of Claire's silence, her fury, her pain. For years, he had told himself he had no regrets. But tonight, Regret was all he had. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. "Tomorrow," he vowed. "Tomorrow, I will tell her everything." Across the city, Amelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart torn in two. She thought of her mother's silence, of Ethan's haunted eyes, of the resemblance she could no longer deny. And in the stillness, one truth rang louder than all the rest. Her life would never be the same again. The courthouse steps were a battlefield. Cameras flashed, reporters lunged forward, and microphones jabbed like spears at every angle. Amelia descended with controlled grace, her expression impassive, her robe flowing like a shield. Claire shadowed her daughter, jaw tight, every nerve on edge. She hated this, the scrutiny, the noise, the endless questions that clawed at the truth they had fought so long to keep hidden. And then she saw him, Ethan, standing across the street, unguarded, no entourage, no limousine. Just him, watching Amelia as though the rest of the world had dissolved. His eyes clung to her face with an ache that no one else would notice, but Claire saw it instantly. Her pulse quickened. She tightened her hold on Amelia's arm and hissed, "Keep walking." But Amelia had already noticed. Her steps faltered. For a heartbeat, her gaze locked with Ethan's. The crowd around them seemed to blur. Then Claire tugged her away, pulling her into the car. The door slammed, cutting off the world. Inside, Amelia's hands shook. "Why does he keep following us?" she demanded. Claire pressed her lips together, staring out the window. "Because he's a man who doesn't know how to let go." Back in his office, Ethan buried himself in contracts and spreadsheets. He ordered his assistants to triple-check numbers, review acquisitions, dig into competitors. Anything to fill the silence. But every figure blurred into Amelia's face. Every signature stroke of his pen echoed her name. He told himself it was impossible. She was an adult now, a judge, a woman who didn't need him. He had no right to insert himself into her world, no right to demand anything. But denial rang hollow. At night, he walked the empty halls of his penthouse, restless. He poured himself whiskey, but it did nothing to burn away the truth. She is mine. And she doesn't even know. His fist clenched around the glass until it shattered in his hand. Amelia sat at her desk late into the night, papers spread across the surface, though she wasn't reading a single word. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. Ethan Ward. The way his gaze had lingered, filled with something more than mere recognition. And worse, she saw herself in him. The curve of his jaw, the shade of his eyes. Even the way his voice carried when he spoke, it was as though some hidden mirror had finally been uncovered. But she didn't want it. She had built her life on strength, on independence, on refusing to be defined by absence. She would not allow him to unravel her. She gritted her teeth and forced herself back to work, scribbling notes furiously just to silence her thoughts. He means nothing. He will remain nothing. But the tremor in her hand betrayed her. Claire sat in the dark, staring at the letters she had hidden for decades. Yellowed paper, tear-stained ink. Letters she had written to Ethan after Amelia's birth, begging him to acknowledge her, to be part of their lives. He had never replied. She had told herself he never received them, that they had vanished into silence. But the truth was, she had stopped sending them. She had convinced herself it was better to raise Amelia alone than to give Ethan the power to wound them both. Now he was back. And Amelia was asking questions Claire had prayed would never come. She pressed the letters to her chest, whispering into the silence. "Please, don't let him take her from me." The next day, fate pushed them together. Amelia exited the courthouse after another long hearing, exhaustion etched into her features. Claire was delayed inside, speaking with a colleague, so Amelia descended the steps alone. And there he was. Ethan. She froze, her breath catching. The crowd had thinned. No reporters today, no flashing cameras. Just him and her, standing on opposite ends of the marble path. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Ethan stepped forward, his voice rough. "Amelia." She stiffened at the sound of her name on his lips. "Judge Monroe." "Please," he said softly. "Just listen." Her pulse quickened. She wanted to walk away, to prove she was stronger than curiosity. But something in his tone, broken, human, rooted her in place. Ethan's hands shook slightly. "I don't want to disrupt your life. I don't want to cause you pain. But when I look at you, I see the years I lost. I see the mistakes I made. And I can't stay silent anymore." Her chest tightened. "Why me?" His gaze held hers, raw and unguarded. "Because you are the only thing I've ever regretted losing." Amelia's throat closed. She turned abruptly, walking away before he could see the tears welling in her eyes. That evening, Claire confronted him. She had found him waiting near the courthouse again, as though tethered there by guilt. "You're destroying her," she snapped, stepping into his path. Ethan's face hardened. "She deserves the truth. She deserves peace. She deserves choice," he countered, his voice fierce. "Don't rob her of that." Claire's eyes blazed. "You forfeited your right the moment you walked away 23 years ago." The words cut deep, but Ethan didn't flinch. "And yet, here I am. Because I can't walk away again." Claire's breath hitched. For a moment, she saw the man she had once loved. The fire, the determination, the vulnerability buried beneath arrogance. But then she remembered the nights alone, the tears, the silence. And her resolve hardened. "You will not take her from me." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the shadows, torn between guilt and determination. That night, Amelia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mother's voice echoed in her ears, warnings, anger, fear. Ethan's voice echoed too, regret, longing, truth. She pressed her hands against her eyes, torn in two. For 23 years, she had believed she was whole without a father. Now she wasn't sure if she had been whole at all. Her chest ached with the weight of questions. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to ignore him. But deep down, she wanted answers more. And that terrified her most of all. Across the city, 3 hearts beat with the same conflict. Ethan, clinging to hope. Claire, clinging to fear. Amelia, caught between them, resisting the truth that threatened to break her carefully built world. And none of them knew the storm had only just begun. The rain came without warning. Sheets of it pounded against the city, washing the streets in silver and drowning the hum of traffic. Amelia stood at the window of her chambers, watching it fall, her reflection a ghost against the glass. Her thoughts were no less stormy. She pressed her fingertips to the pane, whispering words only the rain could hear. Why now? Why him? A knock at the door startled her. She turned, masking the turbulence inside. "Come in." It was Claire, umbrella dripping, hair damp despite her best efforts. She held herself with forced calm, but Amelia saw the cracks in her mother's facade. "You shouldn't be here," Amelia said softly. "People will talk." "Let them," Claire replied. She crossed the room and sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. "We need to talk." Amelia didn't move from the window. "About him." Claire flinched at the sharpness in her daughter's voice. "Yes." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain on glass. Finally, Amelia turned, her eyes blazing. "How long were you planning to keep lying to me?" Claire's breath hitched. I never lied. I just didn't tell you. Isn't that the same thing? The fury in Amelia's tone was unlike anything Claire had ever heard. Her daughter, always so composed, so measured, was unraveling, and it was Ethan's presence that had lit the fuse. I wanted to protect you, Claire whispered. Protect me from what? Amelia demanded. From knowing my father? From seeing the truth in the mirror every day and wondering why no one ever admitted it. Claire rose, tears streaming despite herself. I wanted to protect you from the pain I lived with, Amelia. The rejection. The abandonment. The nights I cried because he never came back. I didn't want you to carry that weight. Amelia's voice broke. But I carry it anyway. Alone. Because you chose silence. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his car outside the courthouse, rain drumming against the roof. His driver shifted uncomfortably, but Ethan ignored him. His hand clutched a folder on his lap, a folder filled with proof. Letters. Old photographs. A single hospital record with a name blacked out, but not completely. Claire had tried to bury the past, but Ethan had money, power, and desperation. And desperation made a man reckless. He knew he shouldn't push. He knew he had no right. But every day he stayed silent was another day Amelia looked at him as if he were nothing but a stranger. And he couldn't bear that. That evening, Amelia returned home, exhausted, her mind still whirling from the argument with her mother. She pushed open the apartment door and froze. Ethan was there. He stood in the living room, soaked from the rain, folder clutched in his hand. Claire stood opposite him, her face pale with fury. What are you doing here? Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Claire snapped. He broke in. Like the arrogant man he's always been. Ethan shook his head. I knocked. You let me in because you knew this moment couldn't be avoided. Claire's chest heaved. Get out. No, Ethan said firmly. His gaze turned to Amelia, raw and desperate. Not until she hears the truth. Amelia's pulse raced. What truth? Ethan stepped forward, extending the folder. This. With trembling hands, Amelia opened the folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some unopened, some tear-stained, all addressed to Ethan Ward. Letters her mother had written. Her eyes darted to Claire, betrayal burning in her gaze. Mom, you wrote these? Claire's lips trembled. I never sent most of them. Amelia's voice cracked. But you tried. Her eyes fell to the next document, a birth record. Her own. A black mark crossed out where the father's name should have been, but faintly beneath the ink, Ethan's name was still legible. Amelia's knees weakened. Oh my God. Ethan's voice broke the silence. I didn't know, Amelia. Not then. By the time I found out, I had already ruined everything with your mother. I was young, selfish, drowning in ambition. And I didn't fight hard enough. That's my shame. But you were never unwanted. Tears blurred Amelia's vision. She looked from Ethan to Claire, torn in two. All these years, you both kept this from me. Claire stepped forward, panic in her eyes. Amelia, please. No. Amelia cried, her voice echoing through the apartment. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To spend my whole life thinking I was enough, only to find out I was living in the shadow of a lie. Her chest heaved with sobs she couldn't contain. Ethan reached out, but Claire blocked him. You don't get to touch her, she spat. Amelia pulled away from them both, her voice shaking. I don't want either of you right now. Not until I can breathe. She fled into her room, slamming the door, leaving Ethan and Claire alone in the wreckage of 23 years of silence. The silence between them was thunderous. "You've destroyed her," Claire hissed. Ethan's voice cracked. "No. The lies destroyed her. You should have told her." Claire's tears fell unchecked. "And you should have stayed." The words hung between them, raw and unanswerable. Finally, Ethan whispered, "I'm not leaving this time." Claire closed her eyes, torn between hatred and the flicker of something she had buried long ago. In her room, Amelia pressed her back against the door, sliding down until she collapsed onto the floor. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the folder to her chest. She had spent her life defining herself by strength, by independence, by the belief that she didn't need a father. And yet, with one folder, everything she believed had shattered. She was Ethan Ward's daughter. And she didn't know if that made her whole, or broken beyond repair. The morning headlines detonated like bombs. Secret connection between billionaire Ethan Ward and young judge. Is Amelia Monroe his long-lost daughter? Claire Monroe's past with Ethan Ward exposed. Claire stared at the newspaper in her trembling hands, coffee gone cold on the table beside her. Her heart pounded with dread. Someone had leaked it. The whispers that had hovered in shadows were now blazing across the city in bold ink. Amelia sat across from her, pale but composed, though her hands betrayed her by tightening around her teacup until it nearly cracked. "Is it true?" she asked quietly without looking up. Claire's breath caught. "Who told you that?" Amelia set the cup down with deliberate calm. "I don't need anyone to tell me anymore. The papers just confirmed what I already know." Her gaze lifted, sharp and accusing. "And they also confirmed what you both tried to hide." Ethan's board of directors descended like vultures. "This scandal will cost us investors," one snapped. "You can't be seen near her again," another warned. "This is a disaster." Ethan silenced them with a single look. His eyes burned, his voice edged with steel. "Let them talk. Let them speculate. I don't care about investors, not today. What I care about is Amelia." His CFO frowned. "Sir, with respect, that young woman is a judge. If this connection is proven, every case she's ever presided over could be called into question. This isn't just about your reputation, it's about hers." Ethan froze, the weight of those words crashing over him. Amelia. Her career. Her future. And he was the storm threatening to destroy it. By afternoon, a summons arrived. Amelia, Claire, and Ethan were all called to a private judicial hearing to address the conflict of interest allegations now tearing through the press. They had no choice but to appear together. The three of them sat in a stark conference room, the air thick with tension. Amelia at the head of the table, arms folded, her judge's composure wrapped around her like armor. Claire sat beside her, stiff and protective. Ethan across from them, his presence overwhelming even in silence. A senior justice entered, his expression grim. "This has become a matter of public trust. Until this is resolved, Judge Monroe, your cases will be frozen. And Mr. Ward, your company's ongoing litigation will be under review." Amelia's face betrayed nothing, but her hands clenched in her lap. The justice's gaze swept over them. "But first, the truth. This room is sealed. Off the record. Tell me, is there a familial relationship here that compromises the bench?" The silence was suffocating. Claire's throat tightened. "Yes." Amelia's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. Ethan's eyes closed briefly, pain flashing across his face. The justice sighed heavily. "Then until further notice, Judge Monroe, you are suspended pending review." Amelia stiffened. Her career, everything she had worked for, stripped away in seconds. When the meeting ended, they stepped into the corridor, the three of them tethered by silence. Reporters were barred from this floor, but the air still felt heavy with judgment. Amelia turned on Ethan, her eyes burning. "Do you realize what you've done? Because of you, my career may be over before it truly began." Ethan's voice cracked. "Amelia, I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you." Claire stepped between them. "You've done nothing but hurt us. Stay away." Amelia raised her hand, silencing them both. "No. I want answers. And I won't stop until I have them." She turned and walked away, her heels striking the floor like gavel blows. Ethan started after her, but Claire grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "She's not yours to claim." He turned, his eyes meeting hers with fierce desperation. "She's ours, Claire. Whether you admit it or not." Her chest heaved. For the first time, tears glittered in her eyes, not from anger but from exhaustion. And neither of them noticed Amelia, around the corner listening, her heart caught between their words. The fallout followed them home. Claire paced the kitchen like a caged animal, fury simmering beneath her skin. Amelia sat at the table, staring at her suspension letter. Finally, she whispered, "I built everything on my own. Every grade, every sleepless night, every sacrifice. And now it's all tainted. Because of him." Claire stopped pacing, her face crumpling. "Because of me, Amelia. I should have told you long ago. Maybe then, this wouldn't have blindsided you." Amelia looked up, her eyes glassy but steady. "No, Mom. Because of both of you. He abandoned us. You silenced us. And I'm the one who pays the price." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan stood at his penthouse window again, city lights stretching beneath him. But for the first time, they felt like a prison instead of a kingdom. He had spent decades clawing his way to the top, and now one truth threatened to topple it all. But he didn't care about the empire anymore. He cared about Amelia. About the chance, however slim, to rebuild what he had destroyed. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed and weary. And for the first time in years, Ethan Ward felt powerless. The storm had forced them together, bound by scandal, lies, and truth too long denied. Claire, still clinging to fear. Ethan, desperate to prove himself. Amelia, stripped of her career, her trust, her certainty. They could no longer escape each other. And in that forced proximity, the fragile threads of their past would either bind them, or finally snap. The world outside was a circus. Reporters camped outside Claire's townhouse, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Cameras flashed whenever Amelia stepped out. Headlines scrolled endlessly across television screens. But inside, the three of them were trapped together, three wounded souls bound by blood and silence. Night fell heavy. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and relentless. Claire sat at the table, exhaustion etched into her face. Amelia leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes stormy. Ethan stood near the doorway, as though unsure if he was allowed inside. Finally, Amelia broke the silence. "You owe me answers. Both of you." Her voice was low but edged with steel. "No more excuses. No more running." Claire's throat tightened. Ethan's jaw clenched. Neither spoke. Amelia slammed her hand on the counter, startling them. "Talk." Claire flinched, then looked at Ethan. "You tell her. You tell her why you walked away." Ethan's breath hitched. His voice was rough, heavy with years unsaid. "Amelia, I was a coward. I chose ambition over love. I told myself I was building something that would one day make me worthy. But by the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late. Claire had gone. You had been born. And I never even knew. Amelia's face hardened, her voice trembling. And when you did find out? Ethan's eyes dropped. I didn't fight hard enough. The rain outside quickened, like the sky itself echoing his confession. Claire's hand trembled on the table. I didn't tell you, Amelia, because I wanted to protect you. Ethan, he had shattered me. I couldn't trust that he wouldn't shatter you too. Her gaze shifted to Ethan, filled with bitterness and something deeper, something closer to grief. I thought if I erased him from our lives, we could heal. But I was wrong. I see that now. Amelia swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. So you both decided my life for me. You both stole my right to know. Her voice broke. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Silence filled the kitchen, thick and suffocating. Ethan stepped forward, voice trembling. Amelia, if I could go back, if I could rewrite every choice, I would. I would have chosen you. Always. Amelia's tears spilled, but her face stayed resolute. You don't get to rewrite the past. You left us. You left me. And now I'm supposed to just, what? Let you walk back in. Her voice rose, raw and breaking. Do you know how many nights I wondered why I wasn't enough? Why my father didn't want me? Ethan froze, gut-punched. His hands shook, but he didn't reach for her. He knew she would pull away. Claire looked at her daughter, her chest heaving. Amelia, you were always enough. Always. He failed, not you. The truth hung in the air like broken glass, painful, sharp, undeniable. The storm outside worsened, knocking out the power. Darkness swallowed the house, save for the dim flicker of candles Claire hastily lit. The three of them were stranded together, no phones, no escape, no distractions. Amelia sat curled on the couch, silent tears tracking her cheeks. Claire hovered nearby, watching her daughter with a mother's helplessness. Ethan stood apart, a shadow in the candlelight. Finally, Amelia whispered into the quiet, her voice almost childlike. Why didn't you fight for us? Ethan swallowed hard, his voice thick. Because I didn't believe I deserved you. And by the time I tried, I thought I'd lost you both forever. The admission cracked something in him. His eyes glistened, his shoulders sagged. For once, Ethan Ward, the billionaire who commanded empires, looked utterly broken. Amelia's anger didn't vanish, but her eyes softened. For the first time, she saw not just the man who abandoned her, but the man haunted by it. You can't just say sorry and expect it to fix everything, she murmured. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. But I'll spend the rest of my life proving I mean it, if you let me. Claire watched them, torn between fear and a flicker of hope. Hours passed. The storm eased, leaving the house wrapped in hushed stillness. Amelia finally drifted to sleep on the couch, exhaustion pulling her under. Claire covered her with a blanket, then turned to Ethan. For the first time in years, her voice softened. She looks like you when she's angry. Ethan's throat tightened. He whispered, and like you when she's strong. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, memories stirring in the quiet. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something fragile. Something alive. The storm had forced them under one roof, truth tearing through every defense. Amelia's anger was still raw, her wounds still fresh. But the silence between them was no longer empty. It was heavy with possibilities, with the fragile beginnings of something not yet defined. They weren't healed. They weren't whole. But for the first time, the walls had cracked. And sometimes, a crack was enough for the light to start seeping in. The rain was gone by morning, but its silence lingered. The world outside Claire's townhouse was still ablaze with speculation, but inside, the atmosphere felt strangely muted, as though the storm had wrung them dry. Amelia sat at the kitchen table, her suspension letter still folded in front of her, untouched. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes shadowed, but there was a stubborn resolve in her jawline. She looked older than 23 in that moment, older and unbearably tired. Claire moved about the kitchen quietly, making coffee as though the rhythm of normalcy could stitch them back together. Ethan stood near the window, restless, hands shoved into his pockets. He was a man unused to silence, unused to having no control. Finally, Amelia spoke. "Tell me everything." Her voice was flat, but there was no mistaking the command. She wasn't the judge in a courtroom now, but she carried the same authority. And Claire knew, this time, there would be no escaping the truth. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she set a mug of coffee in front of Amelia. Her gaze lingered on the steam, lost in memory. "I was 21 when I met him," she began softly, her eyes flickering toward Ethan. "I was waitressing at a charity gala. He was already making headlines, already the man everyone noticed when he entered a room." Ethan shifted, guilt etched across his face, but he said nothing. Claire's lips curved faintly, bitterly. "And he noticed me. For one night, I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world." Her voice grew quieter, distant. "We were fire and gasoline. He chased dreams bigger than life itself. And she stopped, her throat tightening. "I just wanted to be seen." Amelia watched her mother with wide, unblinking eyes. Claire shook her head. "At first, it was beautiful. He made me feel like I mattered. But the higher he climbed, the less room there was for us. Meetings, deals, nights he didn't come home. And when I finally told him I was pregnant..." Her voice cracked. She forced herself to finish. "He looked at me like I had ruined his empire before it even began." Ethan flinched, as though struck. Amelia's gaze snapped to Ethan. "Is that true?" He drew in a ragged breath, his voice rough. "Yes, and no. Claire's right, I panicked. I was consumed with building something that would last. I thought a child would slow me down." His eyes lifted to Amelia, burning with regret. "It was the biggest mistake of my life." Amelia's chest rose and fell rapidly. "So you chose money. Over me. Over her." Ethan's voice cracked. "I chose fear. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, Claire was gone. She vanished with you before I could even beg for another chance." Claire's jaw tightened. "I didn't vanish. I left because I refused to raise you, Amelia, in a home where love came second." The silence that followed was raw, the kind that stripped everything bare. Later that afternoon, Amelia retreated upstairs, her emotions tangled and restless. She needed air, but she also needed clarity. Answers. Proof beyond words. In Claire's room, searching for an old sweater, she stumbled across a shoebox tucked in the back of the closet. She hesitated, then pulled it out. Inside were photographs, faded snapshots of her mother in her 20s, smiling with Ethan, their arms wrapped around each other. Notes written in his hand. A pressed flower, brittle with age. And at the very bottom, a single letter. The paper was yellowed, the ink smudged, but the words still screamed at her. "Claire, I don't deserve you. I don't deserve this child. But please, don't take her from me. I'll do better. I swear it." The date stamped at the top, 6 months before she was born. Amelia's hands trembled. She read it again and again, until her tears blurred the ink. When she came downstairs, Her face was pale, her eyes blazing with betrayal. She threw the letter onto the table in front of them. "Explain." Claire's breath caught. Ethan stared at the paper, his expression stricken. "You knew," Amelia's voice shook. "You knew he wanted me. And you still kept him away." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. Amelia's voice rose, trembling with fury. "You told me he abandoned us, Mom. You made me hate him. But this," she jabbed a finger at the letter, her tears falling hot. "This says you abandoned him too." Claire's face crumpled, anguish breaking through her defenses. "I was scared, Amelia. He said he'd do better, but I didn't believe him. I couldn't risk it. I thought keeping you away was the only way to protect you." Amelia's chest heaved. Protect me? Or punish him? The question sliced the room in two. Ethan's eyes shone with tears, his voice shaking. "Claire, why didn't you show her this? Why didn't you let me prove myself?" Claire's hands covered her face, her sobs muffled. Amelia stared at them both, her voice raw. "You both lied to me. For years. You both took my choice away." The room spun with silence. Claire wept quietly. Ethan sat frozen, crushed under the weight of truth. And Amelia stood between them, her heart breaking in ways she didn't know it could. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive either of you." Her words landed like a death sentence. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Ethan reached after her, but Claire caught his arm, her voice trembling. "Let her go. She needs time." His chest heaved, fury and grief warring inside him. "Time won't fix this. We may have already lost her." Claire's tears fell harder, and for the first time, Ethan didn't pull away. For the first time, they grieved together. The past had finally surfaced, sharp and unrelenting. The truth wasn't clean. It was jagged, messy, cruel. Amelia carried the weight of betrayal from both sides. Claire wrestled with the choices she had made. Ethan bore the scars of the man he used to be. And as the walls of silence crumbled, what lay beneath was not healing, but wounds raw and bleeding. The backstory had been revealed, and it left them further apart than ever. The slam of the front door still echoed hours later. Claire sat motionless at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. Ethan stood across the room, his fists clenched, his chest heaving with the restraint of a man who wanted to break something, anything, to match the chaos in his chest. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Ethan's voice cracked the silence. "You kept that letter from her." Claire's shoulders stiffened. She lowered her hand slowly, her eyes swollen and red. "I did what I thought was right." "You thought hiding the truth was right?" Ethan's tone was sharp, but beneath it, despair bled through. "You stole my chance to be her father. You made me the villain in her eyes for 23 years. Claire's lips trembled. "You made yourself the villain long before I did, Ethan. You don't get to rewrite history and pretend you weren't the one who broke us." Her words struck deep, but Ethan didn't retreat. He stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. "And you don't get to pretend you didn't punish me by keeping her hidden. You didn't just protect her, you buried me with that choice." Their eyes locked, the years of unresolved fury burning between them. Outside, Amelia walked aimlessly, the letter clutched in her fist. The cool drizzle soaked her hair, but she didn't notice. Her mind reeled with questions that wouldn't stop spinning. All her life, she'd built her identity on the belief that her father had abandoned her. She had turned that pain into fuel, into ambition, into the steel backbone that carried her through law school. But now that foundation cracked beneath her feet. Her father hadn't just abandoned her. Her mother had kept him away. She stopped beneath a streetlight, her chest tightening. Who am I, if everything I believed was a lie? Her phone buzzed. Messages from colleagues, reporters, even old friends. Everyone wanted a comment. Everyone wanted her story. She turned the device off and shoved it into her pocket. For once, Amelia Monroe, Judge Monroe, didn't have answers. She only had questions. Ethan paced the living room while Claire sat rigid on the couch. The shoebox of memories lay between them, its contents spilling like ghosts across the table. Photos, notes, fragments of a love that once burned bright and then burned out. Claire picked up one photograph, her younger self laughing in Ethan's arms, the city skyline behind them. Her thumb brushed the edge, and her lips quivered. Do you remember that night? Ethan paused, his gaze softening. How could I forget? You made me sneak onto the rooftop of that half-finished building, just so you could see the stars without the city lights. A tear slid down Claire's cheek. I thought you'd hold on to me forever that night. Ethan's chest tightened. I thought I would too. For a moment, the silence between them wasn't filled with anger, but with sorrow, two people mourning the life they almost had. But memories quickly gave way to anger again. Claire set the photo down sharply. And yet, when I needed you most, you were gone. Meetings, phone calls, mergers, always something more important than me. Than us. Ethan's jaw clenched. I was trying to build a future for us, Claire. I thought if I became someone powerful enough, I could give you everything you deserved. Claire's voice broke. I didn't want everything, Ethan. I just wanted you. The words lingered, raw and piercing. The door creaked open hours later. Amelia stepped back into the house, damp from the rain, her eyes hollow but steady. She found them sitting in the living room, surrounded by the relics of their past. Her gaze swept over the photographs, the letters, the memories she had never known existed. She picked up a picture, her mother and father laughing, so young, so in love it hurt to look at. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. Why didn't you fight harder? Either of you. Ethan rose slowly. I did fight, Amelia. But I fought for the wrong things. I thought money and power could fill the space where love should have been. By the time I understood, your mother was gone. Claire's eyes glistened. And I fought to protect you. But in doing that, I may have broken you instead. Amelia studied them both, her heart pounding. So one of you chased power, and the other chased safety. And I got left with nothing but pieces. Her hands shook as she set the photograph back down. Amelia's voice rose, trembling with anguish. Do you know what it feels like to grow up believing you weren't wanted? To sit in a courtroom every day, defending justice, when the people who should have been my foundation built my life on lies. Her tears fell freely now, her body shaking. You were supposed to love me enough to put me first. Both of you. But you didn't. And now I don't know if I can ever believe a word either of you says. Her pain cut deeper than any accusation. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached out, stopping just short of touching her. Amelia. I can't change the past. But I swear to you, I will never stop trying to earn your trust. Not as a billionaire. Not as some powerful man. Just as your father. Amelia looked at him, torn, her breath unsteady. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds were too fresh. Claire wiped at her tears. He's right about one thing. I robbed you of choice, Amelia. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was protecting myself. I didn't want you to see the man who hurt me. I didn't want to risk you loving him more than me. Her confession fell heavy in the room. Amelia's eyes widened, her chest aching. You both were selfish, Amelia whispered. "You both chose yourselves over me." Neither of them argued. For once, they didn't try to defend themselves. The silence stretched long, broken only by Amelia's ragged breathing. Then quietly, she sank onto the couch beside the shoebox of memories. She picked up the letter again, running her thumb over the faded ink. Her voice was hoarse. "All my life, I thought I was a mistake. Maybe I still do. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life defined by your failures." She glanced at them both. "So either you show me you can be better, or you leave me alone." It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection, either. It was the faintest opening. Ethan exhaled, relief flickering in his eyes. Claire's shoulders sagged, tears spilling freely. For the first time, all three sat together, not whole, not healed, but facing the same direction. The past had been dragged into the light, ugly, painful, unrelenting. Amelia knew the truth now, and it hurt worse than the lies. But amid the wreckage, something fragile remained. A choice. A possibility. The shoebox of memories sat between them, not just relics of love lost, but perhaps seeds of something still alive. The question wasn't whether they could erase the past. They couldn't. The question was whether they could build something new, scarred but real. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, dust motes drifting in the golden glow. The townhouse was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that came after storms, uneasy, fragile, full of things left unsaid. Amelia lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, images came rushing back. The letter, the photographs, her mother's tears, her father's broken voice. It was like carrying two versions of herself in her chest. The girl who had grown up unwanted, and the woman who now knew she had been both wanted and hidden. When she finally sat up, she found Ethan in the kitchen, fumbling awkwardly with a skillet. The smell of something burnt clung to the air. He looked up at her, caught, like a boy instead of a man who built empires. "Don't laugh," he said gruffly, waving the spatula. "It's been a while." Amelia arched a brow, exhaustion shadowing her features but not muting her dry wit. A while? Or forever? Ethan smirked faintly, flipping something that looked more like charcoal than food. "Forever, probably. Your grandmother always told me I was hopeless in the kitchen." Amelia hesitated at the doorway, watching him. For the first time, she noticed how uncertain he looked, stripped of power and control. Not the billionaire in the headlines. Just a man, trying. Claire entered moments later, her robe cinched tight, her expression wary. She froze when she saw Ethan at the stove. "What are you doing?" she asked cautiously. Ethan gestured at the pan. "Making breakfast. Obviously." Claire sniffed the air. "It smells like arson." Amelia snorted before she could stop herself. Ethan turned, mock offended. "See? This is why I never tried. I knew I'd get roasted either way." For the briefest moment, laughter cracked through the tension. Amelia pressed a hand to her mouth, surprised at the sound of it. Claire blinked, her lips twitching despite herself. The moment didn't last, but it lingered, like sunlight breaking briefly through clouds. They ended up with burnt eggs and slightly edible toast. Amelia sat at the table, chewing thoughtfully, while Ethan and Claire bickered lightly about who had ruined what. Amelia set her fork down, her gaze drifting toward Ethan. "Did you ever wonder about me? All these years?" The room stilled. Ethan's expression softened, his voice dropping low. "Every day. I used to look at every young woman on the street, wondering if she was you. I'd imagine your first words, your first steps, what you might look like at 16. His voice caught. He exhaled shakily. I even bought birthday gifts some years. Kept them in a drawer. I never knew where to send them. Amelia's breath hitched. What happened to them? Ethan's eyes glistened. I still have them. Her throat tightened. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. Claire's hand covered hers gently, a silent bridge in the quiet. Later, needing air, Amelia agreed to take a walk, with Ethan. Claire stayed behind, giving them space. They walked through the park, the city buzzing faintly around them. Ethan kept his hands in his pockets, his pace slow to match hers. For once, he wasn't talking like a man used to commanding attention. He just listened. Amelia broke the silence first. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, Ethan admitted. But maybe we don't need to have all the answers. Maybe we just start small. She glanced at him. Small. He nodded. Like walks. Bad breakfasts. Questions you've wanted to ask. Amelia hesitated. Okay then. What's my favorite color? Ethan blinked, caught. That feels like a trap. She smirked faintly. Maybe. He chuckled, then grew serious. I don't know. But I want to. Something in her chest shifted at the honesty. They sat on a bench beneath an oak tree. Amelia picked at the edge of her sleeve, her thoughts heavy. When I was little, she said slowly, I used to pretend my dad was away on some secret mission. That he'd come back one day with stories of the world. Ethan's heart clenched. His voice was raw. And instead he never showed. Amelia swallowed hard, her eyes wet. Yeah. Ethan leaned forward, his voice breaking. I can't change that. But if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to pretend again. Her breath hitched, tears spilling before she could stop them. She looked away, but Ethan didn't push. He just sat with her, silent, steady, present. Back at the townhouse, Claire watched from the window as they returned. For the first time, Amelia walked beside Ethan without that sharp distance in her shoulders. Her face was still guarded, but softer somehow. Claire's chest ached. She had wanted to protect her daughter from pain, but now she wondered if she had protected her from healing too. When Amelia entered, she gave her mother a small, tired smile. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. For the first time, the fractures didn't feel insurmountable. Small moments, a laugh over burnt eggs, a confession in the park, a glimpse of vulnerability, wove threads where there had only been walls. Amelia wasn't ready to forgive. Claire wasn't ready to let go of her fear. Ethan wasn't free from guilt. But together, they had taken the first step toward something fragile, tentative, and real. The beginning of a bond. The following morning began differently. The townhouse wasn't wrapped in the heavy silence it had worn for weeks. Instead, it held a fragile, tentative rhythm, unsteady, but present. Amelia sat at the table with a mug of tea, her hair pulled back loosely, shadows still clinging beneath her eyes. Claire moved about the kitchen with quiet efficiency, slicing fruit, setting plates, humming under her breath. Ethan stood awkwardly by the counter, as though he wasn't sure if he was welcome, his phone forgotten in his pocket. He had dressed down, jeans, a simple shirt. No sharp suits, no armor of wealth. Just a man trying to fit into a space he'd once forfeited. Amelia glanced at him, her lips twitching faintly. You're not cooking again, are you? He raised his hands in mock surrender. Not unless you want the fire department involved. Claire looked between them, her heart tugging at the sight of her daughter's guarded smile. It wasn't much, but it was something. After breakfast, Amelia announced she was going to the library to catch up on work. To her surprise, Ethan offered to walk her there. She hesitated, but Claire nudged gently. "It's a nice day. Go on." Amelia narrowed her eyes at her mother, but relented. The two walked down the quiet street, the city humming in the distance. Amelia carried a stack of papers under her arm, Ethan keeping pace beside her. "You're quieter than I expected," Amelia said finally. Ethan glanced at her. "I've spent a lifetime talking. Maybe it's time I listened." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. As they reached the library steps, Amelia paused. "You don't have to keep doing this, you know. Following me around. Trying." Ethan's voice was soft but steady. "I want to. Not because I think I deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve a father who shows up. Even if it's late." Amelia studied him, her throat tight. She didn't reply, but she didn't walk away either. Back at the townhouse, Claire sat with her tea, staring at the quiet. Memories washed over her, nights rocking Amelia to sleep, mornings praying she'd have enough strength to make it through another day alone, years of rage that had calcified into a kind of armor. She had hated Ethan for so long, but seeing him now, awkward, stripped of pride, trying, she wondered if hate was easier than admitting how much she had once loved him. And how much of that love still lingered, buried beneath scars. Amelia settled into a corner desk, spreading her papers. Ethan sat across from her, silent, trying not to intrude. She shot him a look. "You're just going to sit there and stare?" He smiled faintly. "I was thinking about when I was your age. I'd sneak into libraries too, not for work though. To hide." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Hide from what?" Ethan leaned back, his gaze distant. "From myself. From the pressure of being everyone's idea of perfect. Sometimes I'd sit in the back corner, pretending to read, just to feel invisible for a while." Her expression softened, despite herself. She picked up her pen. "You don't seem very invisible now." He chuckled quietly. "No. Somewhere along the way, I traded invisibility for a spotlight, and lost more than I realized." Their eyes met across the table, briefly, but enough to spark something unspoken. By the time they returned home, Claire had prepared dinner. For the first time in years, they sat around the table, all three. Conversation was halting at first, but it grew. Amelia asked Ethan about his travels, his business ventures, the mistakes he'd made. Ethan answered honestly, never pretending, never hiding. At one point, Amelia asked softly, "Do you regret it?" "All of it." Ethan set his fork down, his gaze steady. "I regret the things I lost chasing it. I regret not being here. I regret missing every moment of your life." Amelia swallowed hard, her eyes burning. She didn't speak, but the silence was thick with meaning. Claire reached across the table, brushing Amelia's hand gently. After dinner, Amelia curled up on the couch with a book. Ethan sat nearby, flipping through a magazine, though his attention kept drifting to her. Claire cleaned in the kitchen, glancing at them through the doorway. It looked almost normal. Like a family. Amelia caught Ethan watching her. "What?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing. Just. I never thought I'd get this. To sit in the same room with you, quiet, safe." Her heart squeezed. She looked away quickly, but her lips trembled with the effort of holding back words she wasn't ready to say. That night, when Amelia went to bed, she paused at her door. She turned back to Ethan, who was settling onto the couch. Her voice was quiet, almost shy. "Good night, Dad." Ethan froze. His throat tightened, eyes stinging. He swallowed hard, managing a shaky smile. "Good night, Amelia." The door closed softly behind her, leaving him staring into the dark, his heart fuller than it had been in decades. Claire, watching from the hallway, pressed a hand to her mouth, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The cracks were healing. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. For 3 days, life inside the townhouse softened. Amelia rose early, heading to the courthouse or the library, her steps lighter than before. Ethan often walked her there, sometimes lingering to pick her up afterward. Claire watched from windows, torn between relief and dread, her heart clutched by memories that whispered, "Don't trust this, don't trust him." Yet she couldn't deny the change in her daughter. Amelia laughed more. She asked questions. She teased Ethan when his cooking failed again, rolling her eyes but secretly amused. It felt like something that had been lost was stitching back together, thread by thread. And that was when the storm broke. It came on a Wednesday evening. Amelia was grading case briefs at the kitchen table when Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, froze, then slipped quickly into the other room to answer. "Who was that?" Amelia asked when he returned. Ethan hesitated. "Just business." She frowned. "You've barely touched work in weeks." "Who?" "Nothing important," he muttered, trying to brush it off. But Amelia's instincts, sharp and trained by years in law, pricked at the evasion. She let it go, out loud, but not in her heart. The next morning, while Ethan showered, Amelia passed by the couch where he had left his briefcase. She wasn't one to snoop. But something, call it intuition, call it fear, drew her hand to the latch. Inside, beneath neat stacks of documents, she found an envelope. A photograph slid free. Her own face stared back, except younger, a child, no more than 5. Smiling, hair in braids, clutching a stuffed rabbit. On the back, written in Ethan's handwriting, Amelia. 2005. Her breath caught. The world tilted. She hadn't even known this picture existed. She waited until he emerged, towel draped over his shoulders. The photo lay on the table in front of her. "Explain," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan froze. His color drained. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "In your briefcase." Her eyes blazed. "Why do you have it? How long have you been keeping track of me?" Ethan stepped closer, desperation in his voice. Amelia, please, it's not what you think." Her chair screeched against the floor as she stood, fury and betrayal spilling from her in waves. "Not what I think. You had this picture when I was 5. You knew where I was. You knew all along." Claire rushed in at the raised voices, her eyes landing on the photo. Her face went white. "Claire," Ethan began, voice cracking. "I didn't." But Amelia's voice cut sharp as a blade. "You let me believe you never wanted me. You let Mom carry that alone. You watched from the shadows while we suffered." Tears blurred her vision, anger burning hot in her throat. "You don't get to sit here now and play Father of the Year. You don't get to pretend." Ethan turned, frantic, to Claire. "Tell her. Tell her why. Tell her I couldn't." But Claire stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were oceans of guilt, of memory. Amelia's gaze whipped to her mother. "What does he mean? Tell me what?" Claire's voice faltered, tears streaking her cheeks. Amelia's chest heaved. She felt the ground falling from beneath her. Both of them. Both keeping truths. Both hiding pieces of her life. She staggered back, her voice breaking into sobs. "All these years, I thought it was one of you. Just one. Now I don't even know if I can trust either of you." The photo crumpled in her fist as she shoved past them, her footsteps pounding toward the door. "Amelia, wait!" Ethan shouted, chasing her into the night. But she was faster, fueled by rage and heartbreak. The door slammed behind her, leaving Ethan standing on the porch, the silence of her absence heavier than any judgment he'd ever faced. Inside, Claire sank into a chair, shaking, whispering to herself. It was supposed to protect her. It was supposed to protect her. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his eyes burning. He had never felt so powerless. He had money, influence, everything, except the one thing that mattered. Amelia's absence echoed through the townhouse like a wound. The fragile bond they had built shattered in an instant, replaced by the old ghosts, lies, silence, betrayal. For Amelia, the world had cracked. For Ethan, it felt like losing her all over again. For Claire, it was the nightmare she had always feared, the truth rising, tearing them apart. The storm had come, and no one knew if anything would survive it. The night air was cold, slicing against Amelia's cheeks as she ran. She didn't care where she was going, only that it was away. Away from the townhouse, from their faces, from the weight of secrets pressing on her chest. Her fists clenched around the crumpled photograph, the edges biting into her palm. She wanted to tear it, burn it, destroy it. But her fingers refused to let go. By the time her legs gave out, she found herself at the riverfront. The water lapped gently against the docks, the city lights shimmering across the surface. She sank onto a bench, chest heaving, hot tears streaking down her face. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, her father's frantic eyes, her mother's frozen silence. Both guilty. Both hiding something. She had thought she'd found a fragment of belonging. Instead, it had all turned to ash. Back at the townhouse, Ethan stood in the hallway, his hand braced against the wall. His breaths came shallow, broken. He had chased fortunes, conquered industries, bought respect and fear, but none of it mattered. He had spent years longing for Amelia's forgiveness, and in one moment, he had lost it all. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor, head in his hands, the weight of 2 decades crashing down on him. Claire stood in the doorway, her hands trembling. For once, she saw not the billionaire, the untouchable, ruthless man the world knew, but Ethan, stripped bare. A man drowning in regret. "She'll never forgive me," he whispered, voice shredded. "Not now. Not after this." Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to rage that this was his doing. But part of her knew the blame was not his alone. Later, when Ethan retreated to the couch in silence, Claire sat alone at the kitchen table. The photo lay between her hands. Amelia at 5. Smiling. Innocent. Claire remembered that day vividly. The way Amelia had clutched the rabbit, her eyes bright. Ethan had come secretly, waiting across the street. He had begged, "Please just let me see her. Just for a moment." And Claire had allowed it. She had turned her head as he snapped the picture. She had told herself it was harmless. But harmless lies had grown into this. Her chest ached as she whispered to the empty room, "Maybe I was never protecting her at all. Maybe I was just protecting myself." Amelia returned near dawn, exhausted but unbroken. She stormed into the house, her eyes red, her jaw set. Claire stood waiting, pale and trembling. Ethan sat silently, dark circles under his eyes. Amelia's voice cut like glass. "You knew. Both of you. All this time." Claire reached for her. "Amelia, please." "Don't," Amelia snapped, jerking back. "Don't you dare call this protection. Don't you dare tell me you did this for me." Claire's eyes filled. "You don't understand what it was like." "Then make me understand." Amelia shouted, slamming the photograph onto the table. Because right now, all I see is two people who couldn't tell me the truth. Ethan stood slowly, his voice hoarse. I wanted to tell you. I begged your mother to let me. She said it would destroy you, that you needed stability, that knowing me would only bring chaos. Amelia's chest heaved. So you just watched me? From afar? Like some coward? Ethan flinched, tears brimming. Yes. His voice broke. Yes, because I was a coward. Because I thought one day, when you were older, I'd finally have the courage. But years passed, and I kept failing you. Again and again. Amelia turned on him, fury shaking her frame. You don't get to cry. You don't get to act broken. You chose this. You both chose this. Claire stepped forward, her own tears falling. Amelia, I thought I was doing what was best. You were so little, so fragile. He had power, money, enemies. I thought if he was in your life, they'd come for you too. Amelia's voice was raw. So you decided for me. You took away my choice. You made me grow up hating him, hating myself, thinking I wasn't worth it. Claire reached out, desperate. I never wanted you to feel that way. Amelia recoiled, her voice trembling with rage. But I did. And nothing you say can undo it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan stood shattered, Claire trembling, Amelia burning. Finally, Amelia's voice cut through, quiet but deadly. I don't know if I can forgive either of you. Not now. Maybe not ever. She turned, walking toward her room. The photograph slipped from her grasp, landing on the floor face up. Ethan bent to pick it up, staring at the little girl he had lost, the young woman slipping away now. His heart broke twice over. Behind Amelia's slammed door, muffled sobs echoed through the townhouse. In the living room, Ethan sat slumped, clutching the photograph like a lifeline, while Claire pressed her palms against her face, sobbing silently. The fragile bond they had built was gone, shattered like glass on stone. Only jagged pieces remained. Amelia sat curled on her bed, the curtains drawn tight against the morning sun. The townhouse hummed with silence, broken only by the occasional creak of wood, as if the house itself bore the weight of what had unraveled inside it. Her chest ached with exhaustion. She hadn't slept, not really. Every time her eyes closed, the photograph burned behind her lids. A little girl, happy and smiling, unaware of the years of silence waiting ahead. She clutched her pillow, whispering to herself, they both lied. They both let me believe I was unwanted. But then came the memory of Ethan's voice the night before, ragged and trembling. Yes, because I was a coward. Because I thought one day, when you were older, I'd finally have the courage. It wasn't absolution. It didn't erase the pain. But it haunted her nonetheless. Downstairs, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee cooling between his hands. His eyes were hollow, his jaw unshaven, his suit traded for rumpled clothes that carried none of his usual polish. He had spent the night in half-sleep, drifting between painful dreams and harsher awakenings. The photograph lay folded in his pocket, never leaving his touch. At dawn, he made a decision. He couldn't keep dragging Amelia through this storm. If staying meant hurting her more, then the only gift he had left was leaving. He whispered it to the empty room, a vow to the silence. If she doesn't want me, I'll go. But she'll never have to doubt that I love her. Not again. Claire entered quietly, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked at Ethan and knew, without words, what he was planning. You're going to walk away, she said softly. Ethan didn't meet her eyes. It's what she wants. Claire's voice trembled. It's what she thinks she wants. Because all she's ever known from you is absence. If you leave now, you'll just prove her right." Ethan's hand curled around the mug, knuckles white. "And if I stay, I keep tearing her open." Claire stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Don't you see? This isn't about one more wound. It's about whether she finally learns you won't run this time, even when she pushes you away." He finally looked up, his eyes wet and haunted. "You said the same thing once, and I failed you." Claire shook her head slowly. "Then don't fail her." Later that day, Amelia sat at her desk, staring at a journal she had never dared open before. The leather cover was worn, the pages blank. A gift from her mother when she'd turned 18. "To write your truth," Claire had said. Her truth now felt jagged, spilling out of her like shards. "I don't know who I am. The girl who was abandoned? Or the woman who was secretly watched over? I hate them for lying. I hate them for making me believe I wasn't worth it. But I also hate that some part of me still wants to believe them. Still wants to believe him." Tears blurred the ink. She closed the book quickly, as if the words themselves were dangerous. The rest of the day dragged, heavy and strange. Amelia stayed upstairs. Ethan lingered downstairs. Claire moved between them, trying and failing to bridge the void. At one point, Amelia ventured out for water. She found Ethan asleep on the couch, his hand clutching the photograph even in dreams. His face looked older, etched with grief. Something inside her twisted painfully. She forced herself to retreat before he stirred. That night, when the house was still, Ethan sat at the dining table with pen and paper. He wrote slowly, carefully, each word heavy. "Amelia, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve to ask for it. But I need you to know, I never stopped wanting you. Not for 1 second. Every birthday I missed, every milestone I lost, I carried it all like a weight I couldn't put down. If walking away now gives you peace, I'll do it. But I'll never stop loving you. You are, and always will be, the best part of me." He folded the letter neatly, sliding it beneath the photograph. A father's offering. In the early hours, unable to sleep, Amelia crept downstairs for tea. Her eyes landed on the folded paper waiting on the table. Her name was written on the front. Hands trembling, she opened it. She read every word twice, 3 times, her tears dripping onto the page. She pressed the photograph to her chest, as if it could fill the empty years. Her breath came unsteady. For the first time, she saw not just the man who abandoned her, but the man who had been haunted by her absence. It didn't erase the anger, but it cracked the wall around her heart. Amelia sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the letter trembling in her hands, the photograph warm against her palm. Upstairs, Ethan lay awake, preparing to leave. The choice now hung between them, whether she would let him walk away again, or whether she would reach for him before it was too late. The first rays of dawn slipped across the townhouse floor, spilling pale gold over Amelia's face. She sat at the kitchen table, Ethan's letter and the old photograph still clutched in her hands. Her tea had long gone cold. She hadn't moved for hours. Her mind waged war with itself. Every wound screamed for her to reject him. Every scar reminded her of the years he wasn't there. But the words on the page, raw, unpolished, desperate, gnawed at her, refusing to let go. If walking away now gives you peace, I'll do it. But I'll never stop loving you. Amelia closed her eyes, whispering into the silence. What am I supposed to do with that? Upstairs, Ethan zipped the last of his bags. He moved slowly, like a man walking toward his own execution. His chest felt hollow, but he had made peace with his decision. If Amelia hated him, if his presence only carved her deeper, then leaving was the only way to give her peace. He carried the bag downstairs quietly. Claire stood at the bottom of the staircase, pale, her robe wrapped tight. "You're leaving," she said, her voice tight. Ethan nodded. "She deserves better than this. Better than me." Claire's eyes shimmered. "If you walk out that door, Ethan, she'll believe every lie she's told herself about you." He swallowed, jaw tight. "And if I stay, I'll just remind her of every scar I caused." Claire's voice cracked. "Maybe. But leaving won't heal her. It will only repeat the past." He couldn't answer. His hand tightened on the strap of his bag as he turned toward the door. From the kitchen, Amelia heard everything. Her heart pounded as Ethan's footsteps drew closer to the door. Panic surged through her. He was leaving. Again. Her chest constricted, her throat burning. The letter crinkled in her trembling hand. If she stayed silent, he'd be gone. And maybe he'd never come back. The thought tore through her like a blade. Before she could think, her voice cracked the silence. "Don't you dare walk out that door." Ethan froze, his hand on the knob. Slowly, he turned. Amelia stood in the doorway to the kitchen, the letter clutched tight, tears streaking her cheeks. Her voice trembled, but it carried steel. "Not this time. Not again." Ethan's eyes glistened. "Amelia, I thought." "You thought wrong," she shouted, stepping closer. "Do you think leaving makes this easier? Do you think it fixes anything? All it does is prove that you're still the same man who ran 23 years ago." Ethan flinched, his chest heaving. "I don't want to hurt you anymore." "Then stay and hurt with me." Amelia cried, her voice breaking. "Stay and face it. Stay and prove you're more than a coward." The silence after her words was suffocating. Claire covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Ethan dropped his bag, his legs unsteady. His voice came raw, shredded. "I don't know if I can give you what you deserve." Amelia stepped closer, pressing the letter against his chest. Her eyes blazed through her tears. "You don't get to decide what I deserve. That's my choice. And I'm telling you, I'd rather fight through this mess with you here than live the rest of my life wondering if you ever truly loved me." Her words shattered him. His body shook, tears streaming freely now. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't resist. He pulled her into his arms, clutching her like a drowning man finally reaching shore. Amelia sobbed into his chest, her fists pounding once before melting into his embrace. "Don't leave me again. Please. Not again." "Never," he whispered fiercely, burying his face in her hair. "Not ever again." Claire stood back, watching the embrace through blurred vision. Her chest ached, but for once it was not from pain, it was from release. For years, she had carried the guilt of keeping them apart, of shaping Amelia's childhood around absence and silence. But now, watching them cling to each other, she realized there was still a chance for healing. And maybe, just maybe, a chance for her too. The bag lay abandoned by the door. The letter was crumpled between Ethan's chest and Amelia's trembling hand. The photograph rested on the table, catching the light of dawn. The choice had been made. For the first time in decades, Ethan stayed. Amelia chose connection over abandonment. And the silence of their fractured past began to crack, not with destruction, but with the possibility of healing. The morning light fell softly across the living room, warming the floor where Ethan and Amelia still sat, father and daughter, broken but holding on to each other as if their grip alone could mend the years between them. Neither had slept. Their embrace through the night had been restless, punctuated with whispered words, with sobs that rose and fell until exhaustion silenced them. Now, as sunlight painted the walls, Amelia slowly pulled back, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked at Ethan as if seeing him anew, not as the stranger who had abandoned her, but not yet as the father she longed for. Something fragile hung between them, an unspoken question. Can we survive this? Ethan's throat worked as he whispered, I thought you'd never let me hold you like this. Amelia's lips trembled. I thought I'd never want to. In the kitchen, Claire moved quietly, frying eggs and buttering toast. Her movements were automatic, a way of keeping her hands busy while her heart reeled from what had unfolded. She glanced toward the living room and saw them, Ethan's hand still resting protectively on Amelia's shoulder, Amelia not pulling away. It was a sight Claire had dreamed of for years, even when she had convinced herself it could never come true. Her chest tightened. Hope was dangerous, she knew. But it was here all the same. She carried plates into the dining room and called softly, breakfast is ready. Ethan and Amelia sat opposite each other, the table between them loaded with food that neither seemed eager to touch. Amelia poked at her eggs, eyes flicking up at Ethan, then away. The silence grew heavy, until Ethan finally broke it. I don't know where to start. Amelia let out a sharp laugh, half bitter, half shaken. Maybe with 23 years ago? His chest tightened. I deserve that. She set down her fork, her gaze hard. I don't want excuses. I need to know. Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you show up? Why did you leave me to think I wasn't enough? Her voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan's hand trembled as he reached across the table. I was a coward, he said, voice rough. Your mother tried to protect you, to keep you safe from the storm I was drowning in. I told myself staying away was best. But the truth. He swallowed hard. I stayed away because I was afraid. Afraid you'd look at me and see only the man who ruined everything. Afraid you wouldn't love me back. Tears burned Amelia's eyes, but she shook her head fiercely. You don't get to decide that for me. You robbed me of the chance to decide. Claire set down her fork, her hands trembling. She's right. Both looked at her. Claire's voice broke. I thought I was protecting her, too. I thought if I erased you, if I filled her life with everything else, maybe she wouldn't feel the hole you left. But it never worked. And I see now. I made her carry my bitterness as well as her own pain. Amelia's eyes widened at her mother, the shock of hearing her admit this slicing through her anger. Claire whispered, I'm sorry, Amelia. I'm sorry for what my choices cost you. For a long moment, Amelia stared at both of them, her mother, weary with guilt, and her father, crumbling under his own. She had spent years building walls of anger to survive. But here they were, both standing before her, stripped of defenses, begging not for forgiveness but for a chance to try. Her voice trembled. You both broke me. Neither denied it. Tears streamed down Amelia's face as she whispered, so now you're going to help me put myself back together. Ethan leaned forward, his voice raw. I'll do whatever it takes. If it means showing up every day, if it means sitting in silence until you're ready to talk, if it means hearing every ounce of your anger, I'll do it. Just, don't shut me out. Amelia's chest rose and fell. She studied him, searching for lies, for weakness. But all she saw was a man finally ready to stay. Her hand shook as she slid it across the table. Ethan's eyes widened, then filled with tears as he clasped it in both of his, holding on as though it were the only thing tethering him to life. Amelia's voice was steady when she asked, How do you forgive someone who shattered your childhood? Do you think it's even possible to rebuild something real from the ruins, or is it better to walk away forever? Backhand index pointing right, what do you think? Comment below with your thoughts. Could you forgive a parent who abandoned you, or would the wound be too deep? The three of them sat at the table, the meal untouched, but something far more nourishing being passed between them: honesty, grief, and the first threads of a fragile bond. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of tears, of promises, of the tentative beginning of healing. The next morning dawned sharper, clearer. The house felt different, not healed, but no longer haunted in the same way. Ethan rose early, pacing the living room like a man testing the strength of new legs. Amelia remained upstairs, but he could hear her moving, her presence no longer closed off behind silence. He whispered to himself, one step at a time. Claire joined him on the couch, holding her coffee. Her gaze was steady. You realize this doesn't end here. Amelia will test you. She'll push you away again. Ethan nodded. And I'll stay anyway. For the first time, Claire smiled faintly. Then maybe you've finally learned. Later that morning, Amelia came down, dressed for court. Her posture was tense, her eyes sharp. Ethan braced himself, unsure if she would acknowledge him at all. She set her bag on the table and looked at him. If you're serious about proving you're not leaving, then come with me today. Ethan's chest tightened. To the courthouse? Yes, she said firmly. Sit in the back. Don't say a word. Don't try to explain. Just be there. It was a test, clear and heavy. And Ethan accepted without hesitation. The courthouse smelled of old wood and paper, the air buzzing with murmurs and shuffling footsteps. Ethan walked behind Amelia, keeping his promise, silent, unobtrusive, present. As Amelia approached the bench, her gaze flicked briefly to the gallery where Ethan sat. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. He gave no nod, no smile, only steady presence. The judge entered. Young, sharp, and undeniably resembling Ethan in his youth. The resemblance once again turned heads, whispers rippling through the room. But this time, Amelia did not falter. She stood tall, her voice strong as she began proceedings. During a pause, the judge adjusted his glasses and glanced at Ethan. For a fleeting moment, it was as though the past had folded over itself. The man Ethan had been reflected in the young judge's features, and Amelia between them, carrying the weight of both. Ethan's heart squeezed, but he kept still. He remembered his promise. Amelia's voice cut through the courtroom, clear and unwavering. This case is not about what was lost. It's about what can still be built. The words rang louder than the gavel, louder than the murmurs. They weren't just for the record. They were for him. When the session ended, Amelia stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. She expected Ethan to hover, to smother her with words. Instead, he simply stood a few feet back, waiting. She turned slowly. You stayed. Ethan's voice was low. I told you I will. Her lips quivered, but she nodded once. Good. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was permission, for him to keep trying. That evening, for the first time in 23 years, they ate dinner together, Amelia, Ethan, and Claire at the same table. Plates actually touched this time. Conversation was halting, awkward, but real. Amelia asked Ethan about his work. Ethan, careful not to overreach, asked her about her cases. Claire added quiet stories of Amelia's childhood, moments Ethan had missed, stitching him back into the tapestry of her life. At one point, Amelia laughed, a small, sharp sound but genuine. Ethan froze at the sound, memorizing it as if it were a sacred gift. As they sat together, Ethan dared to think of the future for the first time. Not a fantasy of erasing the past, but the possibility of new beginnings. And now I'll ask you, if you were in Amelia's place, would you allow someone who abandoned you to try again? Or is trust once broken gone forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. Weeks later, Amelia returned to the courthouse. Ethan was there again, in the back, silent as ever. But this time, when she finished her case, she walked toward him, stopping at his seat. Her eyes softened. "Come on. Walk me out." Ethan stood stunned until she looped her arm through his, not as a daughter fully reconciled, but as one choosing to give him a place beside her. Claire waited outside, watching with tears in her eyes. The three of them walked down the courthouse steps together, not healed, but healing. The past would always ache. The scars would remain. But for the first time, they weren't alone with them. As they reached the street, Amelia whispered almost too softly to hear, "Dad." Ethan's breath caught. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, he knew now, were everything. Now I want to ask, what about you, family? Could you forgive someone who once walked away, or is trust too fragile to ever rebuild? Share your heart in the comments, because this channel isn't just a place for stories, it's a family, and your voice matters here. And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from the US, UK, Canada, or somewhere else in this big global family?
Family, thank you so much for staying with us all the way to the end of this story. Lord, thank you for every soul who watched through. Bless them with peace, love, and restoration in their lives. As they share this story, may joy and healing flow back into their homes. May their days be filled with strength, their nights with rest, and their hearts with unshakable hope. Amen. We're grateful you're part of this family. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more stories like this can reach others. Until next time, stay strong, stay blessed, and remember, love always finds a way back home.